After surviving the console wars of the 1990s,
The Bit War veterans are invading your podcast
to bring you gaming intel,
and old tales.
together we are your hosts, Max Inventory,
And Meow Tay Ching.
and we are the Bit War Veterans! Hello and welcome to episode 18. I can't believe we've been doing it this long, but today we've got a very special double feature for you all tonight.
It's gonna be a hot episode.
Have you ever wondered what it's like to have worked for a video game tip hotline?
Well, we have two very special guests that we interviewed for this episode telling you all about their experiences working at the SEGA Tip Hotline in Australia. And cheat codes. Whatever happened to cheat codes? What were some of your favorite cheat codes? And have you ever called a tip hotline before? We will tell the tales in our Twitter section later, but let's get right into the meat and potatoes of our show.
Before we begin, I have to apologize ahead of time. When we refinangled all of our connections in preparation for doing interviews, we didn't quite get our setup reset correctly, and for some of it, I feel like I'm speaking about 3 feet away from the mic. Don't worry, I will be flogging myself tonight as penance for my sins, but I think it's good enough for y'all to listen to. So without further ado, stay tuned for the upcoming interviews with SinceSpacies and Sega Master Tim. Roll it! Coming to us all the way from Australia, we would like you to welcome Mr. SinceSpacies.
Sir Spacies to you. No, I'm only joking. How you doing, guys? Glad to be here. This is quite a bit of an honor to do another interview again. First time in a long time, actually.
You're used to being the interviewee.
Yes, that's the one. But I have been interviewed in the past. I'm slowly getting used to it. It is still weird, though.
Excellent. Well, let's start off right away. Let's plug your material. Where can people find you? Where can they see you?
Okay, so on the YouTubes, the tubes of you, SinceSpacies. Spacies is short for Space Invaders. It's Australian slang. SPACI. You'll see it anyway in the description, I'm sure. And it's basically Australian slang for Space Invaders because that was my very first video game that I ever got to play all those years ago. God, I feel like an ancient relic. And you'll also see me on Twitter. You'll see me a lot on Twitter.
And you also do Twitch streaming, yes?
Yeah, just something I'm still relatively new at. I think I've got around about 130 followers there. Would like to see that bumped up. I am aiming for 500 as my first goal.
Well, there you have it, folks. That's your initiative.
You gotta follow this man. You gotta make his dreams come true.
Tuesday and Thursday Twitch streams, and I also do the SinceSpacies show on there live as well, which is proven to be a technical challenge getting that orchestrated one-man show.
Well, which is also impressive. For me, one thing that turned me on to this beautiful fella is that he has quite a unique background and perspective in the retro gaming world, the world of video games. His former employer used to be Sega itself. Is that correct?
Well, technically speaking, when I first started there, they were called Aussiesoft, but they did eventually get bought out by Sega. They were the official distributors of Sega in Australia. And you're going to have to excuse my pronunciation of Sega because that's how we used to pronounce it in Australia. I can't get behind this Sega pronunciation. I'll talk to you a bit about that in a second. But yes, I did work on the SEGA hotline.
What an amazing experience I feel like that could have been. Definitely as a kid in all those video game manuals and even advertisements in the magazines, they would have that call the tip line, the hotline. Only 99 cents a minute plus international fees or whatever it was.
No, we didn't charge. It was just a local call.
Wow.
I actually left because they were starting to make it into what was a 0055 number. And back in that era, that used to be usually associated with this, those raunchy sex lines. And I didn't want to be affiliated to having to be charged per call. And I didn't want the pressure of having to find all the cheats while the caller's waiting and paying for the minute while I'm scrounging around our system trying to find what they're after. So that's when I pulled the plug on it.
Interesting. And let's back up before we get deep dive into that. Let's back up just a little bit beforehand now, where you were in charge of or had created your own fan magazine?
The SEGA Times, yes. While I was still in high school. I was only 16 at the time when I first got the idea to do it. And thanks to some help from a guy that was distributing games in the country, he actually published 50 copies of each issue.
Oh, nice.
And it was all written up on a SEGA computer, the SC3000, which was SEGA's very first computer that they ever launched, which later got changed to the SG1000, which was their first console.
And that's so cool because I guess I came up a little bit past that stuff. But either way, other than we had a Commodore 64 growing up, but
yeah,
those smaller computer-like devices really didn't seem to catch on in America that much.
The microcomputers, they refer to it in the UK.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't know. I've got a few theories about why the Americans didn't catch on to it. They just want to put something in and then press start. They don't want to mess around.
Plug and play.
Yeah, exactly right. Whereas the rest of the world was a little more patient with that sort of thing. I was using the SC3000 as a games console. In other words, the games were on cartridge, so I wasn't having to do load commands to get it running. But there were a few games that I did have on tape. Cassette. Yes, that's a thing, kids.
I know. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's weird, isn't it? And you see games being shown off like Street Fighter on the Commodore 64, and it's a cassette. It's something that you just don't even use anymore. Yeah, it's just quite odd.
Well, heck, even aside from the Commodore, we had a very old school IBM computer with the very limited monitor. And if you want to play a game on that, that was like 8 floppies at least, just pumping them in and out.
Yeah, I didn't get into the computer PC gaming until much later because of that reason. I just felt that they were very limited. And it wasn't until the first game on PC that got me interested in looking at PC as a gaming platform. Mm-hmm. It wasn't even Wolfenstein. I think Doom. Doom was the game that made me go, yeah, this has got some potential here. But before that, it's even Wolfenstein, as cool as it was, it still looked limited.
How did the fan magazine lead into from being a huge Sega fan
to eventually working for their hotline?
Yeah, so I'll do the Scooby-Doo effect and rewind back the clock. It's been, God, it's so long ago that the details are fuzzy, but I do distinctly remember calling up the SEGA hotline before I was working there and always wanting to talk about the latest games. As a journalist, quote, a self-made journalist, wanting to know what games are coming out and when. And it wasn't as a kid wanting to know the games. It was more because I wanted it as a journalist to write for my next episode of the magazines that I was writing. And eventually they said, you know what, I think there's someone you should talk to. And they put me through to the national marketing manager of AussieSoft at that time. And I ended up talking to him on a regular basis. And eventually he agreed to send out copies of games to this 17-year-old kid to review for his little magazine that he was selling on his street.
Hey, no publicity's bad publicity, baby.
And it was so cool to just be having these games come in the post, it was a courier. That was the only time that I've ever had anyone other than the normal Australia Post come along to my house and actually get me to sign for a parcel. Just never happened back then. There's a funny story too. They actually sent by accident 4 Sega Mega Drives.
Oh, that's a very happy accident.
I was honest enough though, because I looked at it and went, "No, this is a mistake. I don't know what's going on here." It might have even been more. I think it was 4. There was a lot of Mega Drives, right? I don't know what a plural of Mega Drives is, a gaggle of Mega Drives, but anyway, so they sent me these massive boxes, and I've got them in my lounge room. I'm thinking, what do I do? Do I keep them? Any kid would honestly think that. Come on, be honest.
Absolutely.
And I thought, no, yeah, of course you would. But I thought, now I'm going to get on the line and speak to these guys because obviously there's a mistake. So I phoned them up and then they sent a courier out to go collect them back again. Bad outcome for me, right? No. It actually turned out that someone there remembered that little moment. And later, a manager of the hotline was being fired because, the hotline was just not being pushed enough. It wasn't not enough happening at that time. They needed a fresh start, so they got this new lady in to act as the new manager. And the old guy that put her in place said, your first instruction as manager for this hotline is to hire this guy. And he was referring to one of my magazines. I was sending them copies of it.
That was a very smart move for you.
And that's what got me the job. And my interview was simply, have you played Alex Kidd? Yes. And have you finished it? Yes. You're in.
That was their litmus test.
Pretty much.
It was because they got so many calls for Alex Kidd, right?
Every second call was for Alex Kidd in Miracle World because that was the inbuilt game for the Master System at the time.
Hmm.
So you'd go for a day, and there'll be days where I just answer the phone and go, let me guess, you're stuck in a lake, you're stuck in a room. I just guess what they're going to ask, and I go, yep. Sun waves, moon star, sun, moon waves, fish, starfish. See, I still know the code. And I just recite it off to them. And then that was, every second call. I didn't just go into the hotline fresh, not having been there already. They had invited me in as a kid just to show off the hotline.
And did you write up a piece about it?
No, I didn't. I didn't have that journalist integrity back then to do that. I just figured it was an experience for me. But they did show off a few months out before release a beta copy of Sonic the Hedgehog.
Wow.
And so I was lucky enough to have played Sonic on the Mega Drive before its official release.
So you could say that you were Sonic's first fan in Australia outside of the people developing the games.
I don't know if they probably would have had kids come in, like staff members and whatnot, have their kids come in. But I was one of the first outsiders.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah,
that is a nice tidbit.
Actually, that's not something I've even really thought about. If I was the first outside of SEGA of Australia to see the game or not.
Huh. Were you allowed to talk about it?
It's not like now. There's no embargoes.
Yeah,
because we didn't have mobile phones to take photos of everything, so I wasn't there snapshotting. I wish I'd had a camera on me at the time. It was just not something you thought about back then. In fact, there's very little photographic evidence of me ever even working at the hotline. There's a few photos that I took. I was the only one in the hotline that took a camera in ever, and there's one video, and that's it. That's all I've got to show for any of my time there, which is kind of sad.
And I've seen a few of those posted on your Twitter.
I recycle those because that's all I've got.
I find it fascinating. What a hell of an experience. Let's delve more into that.
What was like the typical day for you starting off?
So when I first started there, it was just the hotline. And that was my main focus, was getting used to taking calls. Remembering that I was this high schooler, fresh out of school, not having had any or much experience with talking to strangers on the phone, etc. So I would have had to have spent a short time getting used to that. And it was mostly kids, and they were more awkward than I was, so that made it easier. But then eventually I knew that they had a magazine, which was called Megazone, that they would develop in-house. Ironically enough, I had actually had an article that was published in that magazine before they bought it. So I actually had some sort of an attachment to that magazine before they even got their hands on it. It was originally called Megacomp, and it became Megazone. And my main goal was not only to man a hotline, because that's a cool job in itself. I was a big fan of EGM magazine, which was still developing at that time.
Yes.
And I was a big fan of the British gaming magazines like Mean Machines, and which wasn't a thing at that time. I think it was still developing, but computer video games and Zap 64 before that. So I liked reading gaming literature and articles by gaming journalists, which was a term that was only still new back then. And I wanted in on that, but there was not much opportunity in Australia for that. But I managed to land on it, and I found it. And I was just lucky that my job also incorporated writing reviews for their in-house magazine. And that was one of my favorite parts of the job, was being assigned a game, and they'll be pulling out like 6 games, and they say, okay, who wants what game? And then there'll be a big fight about who's going to get to review what game. And I'd always end up getting the fighting games for some odd reason, like Street Fighter, and well, before that it was just the side-scrolling beat-em-ups. They always seemed to throw that my way.
Eternal Champions.
I didn't review it.
No? Oh, wow.
No. I left just before that came out.
Oh, okay. So this wasn't during the lifespan of the Mega Drive?
No, Eternal Champions came out kind of midway or a little bit later in the Mega Drive's lifespan. To give you a timeline, I'd left Sega and I was working in a video game store at that time when The Lion King and Donkey Kong Country was big, and if that's to put a bit of a timestamp on it. Mm-hmm. And the Mega Drive was still yet to get Street Fighter by the time I left.
Oh, wow.
And that's what a lot of our calls were still about. When's Street Fighter 2 coming out? When's Street Fighter 2 coming out? It was like every second call. It was getting pretty old.
So let's get into some calls, right? Because that's one thing I've been interested in. I've never been able to call one of those hotlines, so I can only imagine what was coming through your way. We already mentioned Alex Kidd was a big one that was tripping people up.
Yes.
What are some other memories that stand out?
Bored Housewives.
Or
yes?
Housewives.
Really?
Quite a few of them.
So what would they actually talk about?
So your typical call was kids. So as soon as it hit 3:30 or 3 o'clock, the phones would light up and it would be kids, just nonstop kids. But prior to that, it was a little bit slow. The calls were not coming in as fast. So that would give us some time to go out and play a game and write up a guide on a game or hang around. We didn't do a lot of work, I'll be honest. It was a lot. It was just like a hangout. Before 3:30 would come, a lot of the calls would be the Bored Housewives. And the type of games that they were playing were not, they were obviously not going to be playing Double Dragon. That's not their thing. They were calling up for Phantasy Star, and Golden Axe Warrior was another one that was pretty big at the time. God, I wish I bought a copy of that game back then. It is so expensive now. And they were mostly after the role-play game and game tips and how to get past certain parts in those games.
I don't know where this idea came from, because myself growing up, there was never, or at least from where I was in humble old cornfield, Indiana, I don't think there was ever this stigma that females didn't play games or it was a male-dominated space or anything like that. You know, exactly what you're saying there. That's I think, an indicator that, you know, even back then, there was...
That Master System I used to borrow was a girl down the road. She owned it, and she would play it. And I went down to her house, and I helped her play and beat Alex Kidd.
Yeah.
Together, we did that.
Yeah.
We worked it out together.
And back then, the arcades were full of, you know, everybody.
No, my memory of arcades here was it was a lot of deviates. It was a pretty rough.
Well, there were definitely strange people there.
Some of the arcades were pretty scary to go into, but because they had video games in it, I didn't care. That made me brave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even though going rewinding back to the arcade scene, even though I was this weak little 12-year-old, I'd suddenly put my big boy pants on and go into those arcades, knowing that there's kids there that are smoking and got tattoos and whatnot.
Oh, we had that too.
Damn it, I'm going to play that game. I don't care if they're there or not.
Yes.
I even remember pushing some out of the way because I was standing around a game that I wanted to play. I have a distinct memory of that. They were just an obstacle. I didn't care how big or tough they were. That's like, you're not going to get in the way of me and my game.
So I wanted to know about some of the calls that you got. Are there any really strange ones that come to mind, or just really wacky, funny ones that you could remember?
We used to get a lot of pranks. Prank calls were quite big. We didn't get offended. We're kind of like, we're expecting this. We know that this is going to be a thing.
I have to admit, the one time I ever called the hotline, which was the Nintendo hotline, I called to prank.
Well, I actually called the Nintendo hotline from SEGA and pranked them while I was there. So
now that's good. That's good.
That's some beef.
And we'd be ringing them up saying, "Why isn't Sonic available on the NES? When's that coming out?"
I bet you they got calls like that every day.
Yeah, and but there'll be other times when we call them and go, "You do realize this is the SEGA hotline here? We're just messing with you." And they were very corporate, like they were like. So that was before the times of calls being recorded. They didn't have the technology to do it like they do now, but they were just paranoid that their bosses or managers were listening in on those calls, and they didn't want to replicate or reciprocate that intercompany rivalry. They didn't want to engage in that, so we ended up about the Sega versus Nintendo. Yeah,
I think that says a lot about the attitudes of Sega versus Nintendo at the time too, because you guys were out there pranking Nintendo, and Nintendo's trying to have a squeaky clean image.
Yeah, no, they were like, I'm trying to do my job here. Can you please go away, you ruffian, you?
Did you ever get any calls like, why isn't Mario on Sega?
Actually, I don't recall ever getting that kind of call, no. Because most kids, if a kid did that, they wouldn't be asking that because they didn't know, because kids are switched on. That we'd get some kids calling up, though, to say, like, can you help me? We're having a fight with a kid in my school, and he reckons this, blah, 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 and he would say some stupid thing about the kids told him, and then we'd be like, I can't recall ever seeing that in the game. You're going to have to tell your friend there that he's got his facts wrong. So it would be kind of like the Google of 1992. So instead of asking Siri, you're asking the SEGA hotline. Yeah.
That's funny.
You probably settled a lot of schoolyard arguments that way.
I reckon there was a lot of misinformation given out too, don't worry. I reckon that we probably got our facts wrong on a few occasions too, but we were only going off a lot of the people that were working on the hotline were temps. And they didn't know a lot about the games. I was not as understanding back then as I am now. And I'd get angry at the fact that they were hiring people that were temps and they weren't passionate about games. I really got fired up about that. And I got into a few arguments at the time because of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, like, they haven't even beat Alex Kidd. Why are they here?
Well, that was kind of running in my mind. You don't even play the games, and yet you're on the hotline giving out tips. So
I know, right?
well, yeah, so I remember getting round up about that a few times. In hindsight, though, I realized that they could learn what the common calls were and know to give those tips out, because a lot of the calls that were coming in were for the same games. So you ended up reciting some of the codes, the cheat modes off by heart to give out.
So how did this work? You had a computer database? You had big books? How did this...
No, we had... I had a folder, which I've still got. It wasn't an official folder. It was mine that I put together. We weren't as organized as Nintendo or Sega of America. We kind of just made our own things up as we went along. I would have loved to have been given, all right, you are now working at Sega. Here's your uniform, and here's your folder, and this is your badge. It was nothing. It was nowhere near as corporate and organized like that. It was like a YouTube channel, just making it up as you go along. And you just happened to have some person there that was called a manager that was making sure that you turn up on time and left on the right time as well. Although it wasn't hard for us to want to be there. You didn't really get too many people turning up late.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who were really into the games and playing them, I would feel that it would be exciting that you've cleared something difficult and now you're helping others get past that thing that frustrated you or set you back.
I love being able to give out tips and hear the excitement on some of the kids when they go, oh, cool, man, I can't wait to test it out. And that just was like, yep, that's so cool to just know that I gave a code out that he didn't know about before. You'd get a lot of people, though, that would call in and dispute the codes we're giving them. That's not working. You gave me the code and it doesn't work. So they'll be then by the machine. You could hear the master system in the background and they're trying to put it in, and eventually it will work, and then they will apologize.
You gotta press the buttons faster.
Oh, some of those codes were hard to enter in.
Yes, they were.
We've all been there. We've all been there trying to enter in a cheat mode, and you're like, I'm reading this right. B, A, C, D, down, blah, blah, blah. And it's not working. But they would blame us if it didn't work initially.
Of course.
But to answer your question, we didn't have an official Bible or guide as such. I would have loved to have had that. That would be my biggest takeaway from working there. I would so look after that with such pride, having that book. And unfortunately, I don't have any such. The closest I've got is a folder that I made myself with all SEGA characters all over the front of it. But we had a database, which was a big, ugly computer, green monitor, monochrome, and we would enter in all the data ourselves. Years later, when internet started to catch on and you'd see those walkthrough guides, we'd be looking at that going, yeah, we used to do that.
In that database, was that like strictly codes, or were there also tips on how to clear certain parts?
So Sega of America would send us some guides, and we would get someone to type that all in. So it would be searchable on the database, which was more advanced than what Nintendo were running at the time, I believe. They were using just strictly folders and no computers, that is to my knowledge.
Shuffle paper.
I would dare say that the Nintendo hotline experience in Australia would have been, just one moment, I'm going to put you on hold, and then they'll go shuffle, like you said, through the paperwork to find the code. Whereas we could, it's on the video actually that I've got up on my channel. A guy asked for Shadow Dance or a Master System, and I'm able to bring that up straight away within a second, which is pretty impressive for back then to get access to a game's database that quickly. So from that standpoint, Aussiesoft or Sega Aussiesoft should have been proud of that.
Yeah, that's really cool to know that you guys were way ahead of the curve with that.
The only thing is it was hidden behind a paywall. They had to be a member of the Sega hotline to get cheats. So a lot of the time was spent, well, call back once you've joined up and give me your membership number.
Oh, so the call itself didn't cost money.
They used to toy around with how bad they're going to go. They didn't want it to be too much of a paywall, but in the end they were telling us, no, you got to make them be a member and then give out the codes.
Could you give out tips for free, but it was the specific cheat codes that cost money, basically?
Yeah, you could give out hints, but the cheat codes, the up, down, right, and press C and start, that sort of stuff, you had to be a Sega Club member.
Okay, that makes a little more sense. I was wondering how you were operating if you weren't charging per minute.
But it was also seen as a service. So you got to, if you rewind the clock back to that era, we had TV crews coming in doing news articles about how we as a company were super successful in a time when there was a recession on. Everyone else was losing money hand over fist except our company. We were making money in a time when everyone was losing jobs, etc. It was a pretty bad era. So for me to be able to land that job at that time was damn lucky. So we'd have TV crews in all the time, using us as an example of a successful business in doom and gloom times.
That's a neat story. I mean, this is fascinating to me. This is deeper than I thought it was.
It's actually funny that doing these interviews, it all comes back. Whereas if I'm not talking about it, I forget it. So yeah, that's why I like doing these interviews. It just jogs a memory or two.
Moving on from the hotline, you're working at a video game store now. Was this a rental store? Was it a resale shop? Retail? So
this was a shop called The Gamesman, and I dare say, and no one's proven me otherwise, and I did put the question out on Twitter, I do believe that they're the world's oldest still running video game store. So they opened up in 1982. Angelo was the manager along with another gentleman, and yeah, they're still going to this day. It's quite funny. They're kids who were 5 and 8 years old. When I was working there, I was playing against them, kicking their butt in Street Fighter 2. They're now running the joint, which is kind of weird for me to walk in the door and see this big... He probably doesn't remember me well, but I remember kicking his ass in Street Fighter. I know that much. But this is pre having games being traded in. They didn't do trade-ins back at that era. So we're just selling the games and that's it. So that was kind of something that came in a little after. But yeah, I jumped ship from SEGA because I could see that they were cutting hours and they were making it a paid phone service. And I thought, no, this is starting to turn into something that I don't like. I want to get out. Not that I don't like working at SEGA. It's just the environment was kind of changing. So I thought I'll try something different. I wouldn't mind working in a video game store. Talking to people face to face about games would be a nice change of pace. But unfortunately, that job didn't last too long. I was there for about 14 months. And then that was my last full-time role in the video game industry, which is kind of sad.
Now, you went on to write articles. Were you freelance for different magazines? Is that correct?
Yeah, so after leaving SEGA, I stopped writing for the in-house magazine, which was called Megazone. The editor that was running Megazone went on to form Hyper Magazine. Again, another magazine with something else that's still running to this day, which is kind of incredible when you think about magazines, who buys magazines anymore, but they've still got an audience. And he formed a new magazine, Hyper. I was lucky enough to be asked to write articles for the very first issue. Yeah, that was quite an honor. And I've still got 2 copies of that particular issue. And that was quite a special time to try to do this new daring magazine, which had on the cover a bold article about virtuous sex and the future of video games. It was quite racy. They did that on purpose to try and get some sort of a tabloid headline going to get attention to it, and it worked. But each issue of the magazine after that was pretty tame compared to that first issue.
So freelance writing for video game magazines, is that something that you wanted to turn into a full-time job, or is this something that you kind of did on the side, not necessarily as a hobby, but just something that you like to do?
I wanted to work for Megazone magazine, but I couldn't because I was also writing for Hyper. And I actually had the Megazone editor ring me up and say, we're rebranding as SEGA Megazone. Would you be interested in writing articles? And I said, I've kind of jumped ship. I'm now writing for the other team. So I was being fought after, which was kind of cool. But I chose a side and I had to stick to it, unfortunately, which kind of sucked when you think about it. I couldn't write for both magazines. But anyway, after my time with Hyper came to an end, and the only reason why it came to an end was because PlayStation was starting to come out, Saturn was starting to come out, and these consoles were stupidly expensive at the time. I just did not have the money, and I was not doing well financially at the time because I didn't really have any skills except helping kids out on hotlines, and so I didn't know how to turn that around into getting out of work. Eventually, the writing I did go into Hyper Magazine as a last desperate effort to try and get a full-time job there, and they said, sorry, we just don't have any positions open, unfortunately, and I kind of gave up on Hyper. I stopped writing on their magazine from that point on. About 5 years later, there was another Game Pro magazine. Does that ring a bell?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
They were trying to form up an official Australian version of the magazine, and I got wind of this, so I actually went in person, and I wanted to stand out. So I typed out the resume and printed it out, and I stuffed it down the throat of a rubber chicken. Gave him the rubber chicken. And I think I freaked them out because I never heard back from them.
Really? Because now I would have imagined that was kind of GamePro's style. They're kind of a wacky.
They thought some weirdos just knocked on my door and give me a rubber chicken. What's this about? I was so nervous because, again, I was a lot younger than I am now, and just didn't really have that confidence that I do now. And I just gave him the rubber chicken and kind of walked out thinking, what the hell am I doing? And because I got the idea from, it was a video in a game talking about how this guy got a job at Atari. He says, well, I got that resume and I shoved it down the chicken and I gave it to him and he hired me on the spot. I thought, oh, I'll give that a try. And I'm sure that was just a story because it didn't work in reality.
Huh. Well, I would have definitely kept you in mind.
I was just really annoyed that they didn't give me the chicken back.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, come on now. Now that's just mean.
I mean, come on. How many resumes do you look at a day if you're hiring for someone? How many people do you interview? So you got to find some way of standing out, haven't you?
How are you going to outdo that? Yes, I'm telling you, I probably would have hired you based on that. It's like he's got previous writing experience. Give me the chicken guy.
Yeah, that ended up being my last shot. That was my last roll of the dice. And so from that point on, didn't really do anything gaming-wise officially. 2006 came along and GameSpot.com had this thing where you could upload a video. And I'm thinking, how do you do video digitally? I don't have a camera, but I had this camera that did this really grainy sort of, you could do videos that were limited to like 4 minutes or something like that.
You had the Game Boy camera? Is that what it was?
No. It was a Canon, and it took SD cards, which were a brand new format at that time. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I did 2 videos. One which was talking about my favorite games of all time, and I was standing in front of the camera, nervous. I had Here's Johnny playing in the background to try and add some wacky sort of background music because I didn't know anything about mixing or editing or anything at that time. And I'm just standing there in a Hawaiian shirt and grabbing the game, talking about it, and then throwing the game to the side and then grabbing the new one. And I did that for like, I think it was a 4-minute or more video. I can't remember. It's no longer there, unfortunately. And I was getting some comments like, that was really good. When's your next video? I'm like, people want more of this? This is weird. And so I then did another video which was complaining about Xbox 360 compatibility with the original Xbox and how they said that it was supposed to be compatible, but it wasn't. I got all my Xbox collection and divided it into 2 piles to illustrate the point that very few games actually work on the new console. That again got a couple of likes and comments, and I just didn't go back to it. So yeah, I was doing those 2 videos for this new internet thing. I didn't grab the opportunity. I had the opportunity there to become one of the first YouTubers, and I just didn't have the decent equipment, the internet connection. I had all the excuses in the world, and I just didn't push on with it. It wasn't until years later I was just missing talking about video games. I was missing being in the industry. I was missing just being in reach with other people who were passionate about video games like I am, and it was killing me. So one day I just went, screw it. I'm doing a YouTube channel. Every other man is dingo's doing it. I'm going to do it. I set up the channel not having any freaking idea what I was doing. I was just in front of a camera. It was right here, actually, and no lighting. I've got a shadow going across my face. I've got a Disney Sing It mic. and I played Sonic Gems, the collection. And for my first effort, you could see where I was going wrong. There's no getting away from that. But you can also see that I kind of did okay for my first attempt, considering I had no idea how to use the software editing, how to sync the boxed sort of face camera in time with I had to get my head around that concept. The syncing was kind of okay for most of the video, but a little out and sometimes. So it was such a big learning curve. I'm still learning all the time. Just getting that first video out and getting all the likes and the comments on that first video just made me realize that this is the right thing to do. This is something I should have done a long time ago.
I kick myself for not jumping in on that. And I've had background in guerrilla filming and editing and putting it through computer even back when it was VHS tapes and VHS mini tapes, because I'd made films with friends, and we actually started with stop motion with action figures and stuff, uploading them to what were those old Mac computers called that were the colors like the G2, G3 or whatever. One was like blue.
Yeah,
And
those.
the next one was all gray.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I don't remember the names.
I kick myself looking back now. I could have been the angry video game nerd. Damn it.
He's not the first. It was being done in Japan before the West even got in on it, but not the same way. Like the one in Japan was a TV show that later became a Nintendo DS game based on the show. And it was a fictitious character set in a company that he was an employee of this big company, and his only job was to finish video games. And if he finished the video game, he would level up the company. Each series he have a different rank. And a made-up title. And it was kind of cool. But he was allowed in each episode, he's allowed to call in help from the outside only once per episode. So that was kind of like the catch. And he would often get asked, do you want to call for the help? And he would say, no, I'm going to do this myself. I don't need the help. And
wow.
It's never been translated into English officially. There are unofficial YouTube videos out there which would have the translations. They're worth watching. They really need to translate this. Game Center CX. Game Center CX found it.
No, this is fascinating now. I'm completely ignorant to this, and I have got to know more.
So definitely worth looking up Game Center CX. But yeah, fast forward to 2017, 16, I think. I started up the YouTube channel. And then a couple of years after that, I managed to get to the point where I can start asking big names to come onto the channel. And my biggest crowning achievement to this day is having Al Nielsen and also DJ Slope, not Slopes, Slope, sorry. And also, and having those other guests on the channel at that time for my All SEGA podcast episode. So having Al Nielsen on, the guy that came up with the expression, Genesis does what Nintendo don't, and talking about his time of when he was acting as the liaison between SEGA of America and Michael Jackson on my channel.
Wow.
That was such a cool video to shoot, and I find it's going to be hard to top that.
And that's still up.
Yeah, you can still watch that. It's called Yes, Another SEGA Podcast, because I've changed out the name bloody with SEGA just for that one episode. And it's episode number 12. It's the most watched episode of that series. The only other way I could top it was getting to be featured on IGN front page for a week. No small task. I was on the front page with my story about the Sonic Sally statues being saved from Sega World.
Oh, yes. We were hearing about that.
Yeah, I think I know I mentioned it on Twitter, telling you to reach out to the YouTube people from Defunct Land, because all they do is cover abandoned theme parks and, rides that didn't work out and they got torn down. So if you have a lot of history, I think it'll be right up your alley.
It's still number one video on my channel this month, for example. Yeah, it's funny how people make their way to your channel. Just get weird and wacky with your ideas on your videos. Don't think that anything's off limits.
Since I have no plans to quit the day job, I'm just like, hey, if you got an idea, let's just fire it up there.
Well, from everything you've said, I find it really interesting that I feel like you were always sort of ahead of the curve with the hotline, working on those computer systems that had everything cataloged, being one of the first people to submit video to, what was that? Did you say GameSpot?
Yeah, GameSpot.com.
Yes, GameSpot.
They would give you your own page and let people view your page and leave comments. It was just like, they missed the ball there. They had YouTube before YouTube. Well, when YouTube was still starting, they could have capitalized on that. They missed big time.
Well, I always feel like you're just a little bit ahead of the curve here, and I'm finding that really interesting. So whatever you're into now, whatever your interests are now, whatever your ideas are floating around your head now is probably going to be big, like 5 years from now.
Well, I'm hoping so. I'm trying to, rein in some ideas from other people too. My fight now at the moment is to try and encourage more Australians to get actively involved with YouTube and online social media. We're a shy bunch, I think. We don't like standing in front of a camera and making a fool of ourselves, unless your name is Steve Irwin.
Or Leo.
Yeah, a Leo. But I would like to see more Aussies take on the YouTube platform or just social media in general. And it would be good to see what I'm trying to build is a network of YouTubers that bounce off each other and create a friendly environment for people to go onto YouTube and know that, oh yeah, that's that guy. He talks to that guy, and they all sort of like form this little mini online community within YouTube, and it'll be just cool to say, I wonder what he thinks of that person, or it'll be cool to see what happens if those two get together and film a video. What will happen? That's the kind of thing I'm trying to aim for now.
And that's what we're trying to tell you, listeners. You must investigate for yourself. The SinceSpacies channel, the SinceSpacies network.
It's happening.
Go to his Twitter, his Twitch, whatever platform you use. I'm pretty sure he's there.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitch, Instagram, Facebook. What else is there? YouTube, Instagram. I'm trying to think of the other ones. No, they're the main ones anyway. And Twitter.
I don't find a lot of negativity or hostility or anything like that within the community that we're in. I feel like seems to be, to me, a very good group of retro gaming people, modern gaming people who share the things that they like, promote the things that they like.
I found more opportunity on Twitter than on Facebook.
Definitely. So that's what we got to do. Listeners, reach out to SinceSpacies, get on with what he's cracking out and some of the people he's associating with. Do you want to give any shout outs to maybe some other Aussies that you'd like to promote?
Shout outs to, there's the Top Loader, there's Uncle Chunt, and I know there's Retro Kaiser down in Melbourne, Wacko Jacko, who was on my very first podcast. I just, and of course Lucas from the Australian Gamers Experience. Sorry. Yeah, got
Excellent.
It right the second time.
Any other final parting words of wisdom for the podcast listeners?
Do you have any tips for us?
Big time. Ignore the recommended tab. Do not go to the trending tab. That is hell. Living hell going there. Go find a channel that you're possibly interested in and actually check out their back catalog. Don't be afraid to scroll through and check out some of their older stuff. There's been many channels that I've gone through and found, because I've gone through their older videos and just found that some of their older stuff is an absolute crack up. Sorek Space in the UK. We've also got Grumpy Retro Gamers. Their old back catalogue is just funny, and I just go through to try and find any videos that I might have missed. Don't be afraid to run with an idea. And if an opportunity comes up to do a video on a topic that you think might be new, might be something that no one else has covered, go for it. Don't hesitate, because the minute you hesitate, there'll be about 5 other channels that will get on it. Don't be afraid to put a video out there, no matter how stupid the concept might be.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, SinceSpacies.
Not a problem.
Well, we greatly look forward to working with you again in the future. Hopefully one day coming back on the podcast to promote something else or share some more experiences.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on our channel, be on our podcast, and we thank you so much, and we're always following you. And if you don't follow SinceSpacies, then what are you doing? Hop on Twitter, hop on YouTube, subscribe to this man.
I don't bite. Thanks, Max. Thanks, Meow.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you very much for today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we are joined by another special guest today, another SEGA Hotline master, as they were called. Please welcome to the show, Tim Gadler.
Yay! Hello!
Hello and welcome.
Yes, thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me on your show. Much appreciated.
So let's start off right away with where people can find you and your material.
Basically, my main material is solely on Twitter. At the moment, I'm trying to figure out where else I'm going to branch out to. So all my stuff is basically at Tim Gadler. That's all you got to look for on Twitter. Also go by the name of Sega Master Tim, which was my actual title when I was working for Sega. Yeah.
You're like the old wizard in Monty Python's Holy Grail.
Yes.
Call me
yes.
Tim.
Some know me as Tim. Yes. yes.
What is your favorite color?
Yeah. What is it? Blue. No, red. A man who appreciates fine comedy.
One of the best.
That's good. The best, mate. The best. Yeah. Yeah. So that was our actual title. Sega Master Tim.
So growing up, obviously, you somehow got into video games.
Yep.
And I just want to know, where did you start with gaming, and then how did that lead you into Sega? And then, how did your interest in Sega blossom into actually working for them?
Bit of a long journey, I guess. So as a kid, I always loved playing games. So even before video games were bobbing about, well, before they eventually came over to Australia, I was playing board games. And, not like the sort of board games you get today, just your regular Monopoly, or we had games like Squatter. It was like an Australian version of Monopoly. Huh. So I played board games and simple dice games like Yahtzee and that.
The classics.
Yeah, the classics, yeah. But the thing is that a lot of those games I played on my own because you couldn't really play if you didn't have many friends, or if your friends were all in school, then I couldn't play. And the problem with me when I was growing up, I had a lot of problems with my type 1 diabetes, where my blood sugars kept on going high, and I suffered a lot of comas during that time.
Mm.
And so I was in hospital. So there wasn't much for me to do other than watch old regional television. I grew up in a small country town called Beechworth. Yeah, so there wasn't much to do. Yep. So I started off with board games, and then there was pinball machines, but there wasn't many. There was probably only one or two in the little town that I lived in. So that built up my curiosity. And then one day at a local gym, I saw Space Invaders for the first time, and that blew my mind. And I spent a lot of time down there when I was able to get down there, playing this game. And then another game would eventuate. So like Gyrus and Galaga. Yeah, and then I heard that video games were coming home. So I started off with a simple Pong set. It was just like a generic brand. And I went from that to a TRS-80. I still have regrets buying that because it served no purpose in my life whatsoever.
Wow.
Oh, it was just a crap thing. Oh, it was so bad.
You said TRS-80?
Yeah.
What did it do?
It was so TRS, yeah, so Radio Shack, that's what we're talking about. So it was like a poor man's Commodore 64, basically. But it had barely any games. There were no third-party titles. It was just a terrible system. Yeah. So I went from that to a 2600, and things got better. And then one day in about 1986, 87, my eyes first saw the Sega Master System, and things completely changed after that. I became a big fanboy for the Sega brand. Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah. So,
well, and by that time, were you starting to recognize or pair the Sega name with certain arcades that you were enjoying at that time?
Being in a small town, we didn't have like an arcade. We couldn't get something like that because we didn't have enough people. So the nearest town to me was a regional city was a place called Albury, and there was a place called Alien City, and that had an arcade there. So I heard about all the games and saw all the games, mainly through a magazine from the UK called CMVG. It was basically our lifeblood in Australia as to what was coming out in terms of video gaming. Yeah. So when I saw these games and I saw the Sega brand, I could say, oh, well, they're in the arcade. They've got a home console. So that's how I married up the two. So that made me a bigger fan even more. And you could see it was great because the Sega Master System ported a lot of titles from the arcades, like, Afterburner and Teddy Boy, and Transport is actually a ported game from the arcade too, which was one of the first games that came out on it.
Huh.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that. I think it was called Astro Blaster, and it played in a different format to what you see at home. Yeah. So
interesting. They also did Space Harrier, didn't they?
Yes, Space Harrier. Yeah, I have that title. Yeah, Space Harrier, Outrun. I mean, the list just goes on. Just classic Sega titles.
That's true.
Being able to be ported onto your home console. Yeah, it was great. It's great.
A little backwards for me. I didn't become aware of the Sega Master System until I had already had a Nintendo, and there was no way we were going to have another console right away.
Well,
not enough money for that.
The Nintendo didn't have as big of a name in Australia when the NES came out. Sega the games were being distributed by a company called Sega Aussiesoft, and so they just flooded the market with the Sega brand here. So pretty much everybody played Sega. As the years went on, when the Super Nintendo came out, the battle increased, to say. Yeah.
The bit wars begin.
The bit wars, yeah. But the bit wars, they were already there because, Mario, Super Mario Brothers was pretty much the most popular game, obviously, back at the time. But I think more people leaned towards the Master System simply for the color palette and the porting of arcade titles that were very popular.
I definitely thought it had a better look to it. When I had seen one on display, I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah, yes.
I think this is actually better than the Nintendo we got. But
Yeah, that's right. Oh, no, look, don't get me wrong. The Nintendo was great, but...
Oh, definitely.
People make judgments basically on what they see more than what they hear. So when they see it and they compare the two, yeah, of course you're going to go with the Sega just because of it looking more colourful. Yeah.
Well, and I came straight from Atari 2600, so it was, big leap for me.
Yeah, it would have been a big leap, and it was a big leap for me. A lot of my friends were playing with their Commodore 64s and Amigas, and when the consoles came out, it would still almost be viewed today as that, you look at a console and it's a very simplistic machine. You can't play your simulators on it. And when I went out and got a console, I didn't know anyone else with a console in town.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's like I was the first person. So
instantly the most popular kid, right? Chick magnet.
Well, yeah, look at me. Yeah, check me out, man. Want to come home and play some Space Harrier? Yeah. No, just like being in a small town, everybody knew everyone, and it was almost like you had to go with the flow. Like you had to join the local footy team, or you had to do this, or you had to do that. And I often didn't think that way. I was sort of like, well, look, why should I go with what everybody else likes? If I like something, then I'm going to go with that. So, yeah. And now looking back, I guess I was right to go with the console.
Oh, I know, right?
Because if I didn't get that console, I wouldn't be talking to you today.
You would just be regular Tim, not Master Tim.
No, I wouldn't be Sega Master Tim. I'd be just Tim. That's it. Yeah, so I got my eyes on the Sega Master System. I got my hands on it, played it to death. I was loving it so much, I wanted to know who I could contact in Sega. And I wasn't really sure. I just assumed everything came from Japan, technologically wise. And I looked back on one of the cartridges, and I think it was the Afterburner one. I'm not really sure to this day. And I found out that there was an address in California. So I got the address, and I wrote in a letter how much of a fan I was. And I said, I really like Sega. Can you tell me what's coming out and all that? And from that fateful moment, everything changed. A woman by the name of Judy Jett that worked I think she was head of customer relationships. I can't really remember. She became my pen pal.
Aww.
And she sent back letters to me. And to this day, and they're sitting right next to me right now, all these letters that she sent back to me about what was coming out. She'd send me 3 little pamphlets. She even sent through to me Power Strike, which is now worth about, $250 worth. And it was one of those with the grey label. It's a very rare edition.
Oh.
I don't have it now, but, oh, God, regrets. Oh, Jesus. Yeah. So she sent through stuff to me. And I'd send through stuff to her, whatever I could, We talk a lot. Because I was in hospital a lot, I had to deal with a lot of soap operas. So back in the time, there was a lot of Days of Our Lives. So
yeah, All My Children.
Yeah, All My Children. No, we didn't have All My Children.
Oh, okay.
but we were generally about a year behind the US, because this is the thing you've got to understand. Back in those days, Australia used to get a lot of things way behind everyone else in the Northern Hemisphere. But then once globalisation occurred, once our markets opened in Australia, we became more up to date with the rest of the world in terms of products, in terms of media, everything like that. Everything just went sort of kept in line with the Northern Hemisphere. So yeah, we've been sharing all these stories. And then one day I get sent this box. Okay, she didn't give me any warning about this box. She just sent it through. And I open up the box, and on the top she goes, "Hi, Tim. I hope you enjoy all of this. This is really going to help you with all the games you've got now and all the games that you haven't got in the future." I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? And I open it up and I'm looking at the first sheet. I think it was for Grevelius, which I think I'm pronouncing that name wrong. I can't remember. It started with a G, yeah. And it had a walkthrough and it had cheats. And I'm going, this game hasn't been released in Australia yet. So I pulled out the next page and it was another page of the same game and then a different game and another game. So what I had was every tip, every cheat, every walkthrough for all the games that were in Australia at that time, plus all the other games that had not been released. So we're talking about, if we were going to compare a library, we only had 30% of the total library that was from SEGA at the time in Australia. The other 70% we did not have. And I got all these cheats and that. And I'm like, oh my God, this is freaking amazing. But there was a problem with that because I did not have the games. I couldn't afford the games. My parents couldn't afford them. So I was just sitting on this mother load of information that, like, basically no magazine could provide and no other hotline would have. And I didn't know at the time there was a hotline. I had no idea that there was. And so that goes to the next phase. I got my hands on a cartridge and it said on the back, stuck in the game, call the SEGA hotline. And it was a number in Sydney. So if I was to compare things where I was living, Sydney is about a 10-hour drive from where I lived. It's a different state altogether. So I thought, I'll give them a call and see what they're like. So I go, oh, yeah. Oh, I'm stuck on a game. Oh, okay. Did you know the cheat for this game? And I said, well, how did you get your hands on it? Oh, because I've got this thing. But no, anyway, I'll see you later. And that just made me realise what I could do with this information. I reckon if I pushed hard enough, I could actually get a job at this hotline. And you got to understand, like, living in a small country town, my country town, there was only two main industries in Beechworth. One was a mental asylum and the other was a prison. Oh. Yeah, so the chances of employment there were very limited, so a lot of people, they had to move out of town to get a job, but a lot of those people finished their high school and I couldn't because I wasn't at school enough to do that. So my choices were limited. But when I found out about the hotline, I was a big SEGA fan. I knew something. So anyway, just about every week I kept on bugging them. How do I get a job up there? What do I need to do? And finally they gave in. I think they just gave up and said, oh, look, we'll just see what he's got to say. Probably put him down, say, oh, no, he can't get the job. So anyway, gave me the interview. I had to fly up to Sydney and that cost a lot, thanks to my parents. They paid for that.
God bless.
Yes. Thank you to my parents. They sat me down for the interview. I've never done a job interview in my life. They asked me a few questions about me and eventually they get around to the question, okay, so what makes you think that you're best suited for this job? What can you bring to this company? And I had it all set up and I pulled out this sheet of paper out of my bag and I slid it across the table. I said, what's this? And I said, no, just have a read, reading this sheet. And I can't remember what game it was, but I said, where'd you get your hands on this? Well, I explained the story about Judy in SEGA of America. I said, oh, right. Well, have you got some other cheats? I said, yeah, I've got a whole big box full of them. She sent them all through to me. Oh, well, can we have them? And I said, oh, well, it depends.
I'm a package deal. This is a package deal.
Yeah. Because I always say, you got to tease them. If you want something, you give them a little sample and then...
So you knew even back then?
Yeah, even. So...
how old were you about this time?
I was 18 at the time.
Okay, you were playing it smart. You had a lot of leverage.
Some life sense. Yeah. By then. You'd watched enough soap operas. You knew.
Oh, yes, I knew. Yeah, that's... Now I've just had an epiphany. That's probably why I did it that late.
You know what? I grew up watching my mother's soap operas in the morning.
Oh, okay. I sort of look at them today and go, well, how the hell did I enjoy these things? It's just so...
Oh, I know.
Oh, it's rubbish, really. Anyway,
it is.
So lo and behold, a week later, they rang up and offered me the job, and I was so stoked. I was so happy. I never thought I would get out of that town. I never thought that anybody would ever give me a chance at anything because... Look, I passed my high school. I passed year 10 with 3 weeks of schooling, but who's going to employ anyone who hasn't completed their high school at least? So they gave me that opportunity, and I still say to this day, I'm so thankful for that one opportunity to work up there. Yeah. So
And by this time, the diabetes was more under control?
no, it wasn't perfect.
Uh-huh.
I remember that about 2 months before I went up to Sydney, I just came out of hospital from another coma.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I still had, I think, maybe 1 or 2 comas once I moved up to Sydney. I also took some onus on myself to see specialists to keep a close eye on me while I was up there because, look, I knew the responsibility I had because, look, I've got a job, I've got a responsibility to them. So therefore, I've got to do everything I can do in my power to try and get things right. I always say to people, look, I'm a reliable person, but my body isn't. I still have problems today, not coma-wise. You know, internally, my system's absolutely stuffed up. It really is. I don't look it, but it is completely stuffed up. So I've got a problem with the kidneys now where they're failing on me. But I just push on through because I know my responsibility is not to myself, but to those that depend on me.
So these papers, and that's fantastic.
Yeah.
The amount of determination and will, it's impressive, sir.
Oh, but
The
well, if you want something bad, you'll do anything to do that.
absolutely.
Yeah, just knew I could get the job if I bugged them enough. I knew it, but I knew that they wouldn't regret having me there either because of all that information.
So so that was my next question. These papers you were getting, so these were like Sega internals?
Yep, they absolutely were.
Oh
yeah.
my goodness.
They were direct from the SEGA hotline. The way it worked was that SEGA Aussie Soft was basically drip-fed any sort of information in terms of cheats or that. They didn't get much information. So the database that they had was very limited on cheats and that. So what the staff had to do was play and crack the games, and hopefully, just hopefully, they might be able to stumble upon a cheat where you could select a round or have infinite lives. Yeah, coming in with that information, it helped set them up for the next 6 to 12 months for their database to keep them all informed as to what was coming out. You know, games that hadn't been released, we were all ready to go when the game came out.
And at this time, did you also consider yourself a good player?
Oh, I thought I was, yeah.
Yeah?
I handed in high scores. There used to be this thing where you had to take a picture of the screen with your dodgy camera
Polaroid?
and then send it through to like the magazine I mentioned before, CMVG, where I had a supposed high score record for Fantasy Zone. I had it for Teddy Boy as well. Oh yeah, and later on down the years, I actually had a high score for RC Pro-Am for the NES. I actually had that, yeah. But I look on Twin Galaxies now, and yeah, my scores are nothing compared to what's out there now. So I definitely saw myself as a serious gamer because what else could I do? I mean, I played games, I tried to crack them. Look, that was like one of our jobs was to play games, crack them, get familiar to them, and then fill up the database with the level details as to what you had to do.
Right.
Okay, so the database.
I was just gonna get into that.
Nice segue there.
Because Spacies told us in his interview that Sega had this database for their hotline, which was kind of like ahead of its time in a way. He compared it to Nintendo and their hotline, where they just had a bunch of like papers and folders they had to shuffle through. But you guys actually had the database, the mother brain.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, with a beautiful monochrome screen, and it had like 24 function keys for the keyboard across the top. And so basically we used that to put in customers' details. We also, as I said, we put in cheats and all that. Yeah, and we'd save that work. And we'd always have somebody playing a game and they might find something new, so they get straight onto the computer and then update it again. That might be helpful for the other Sega masters that were working there. Look, everybody had like a particular genre of game that they were good at. And so what we would do is that if we couldn't help the customer calling up, then what we would do is hand them over to another Sega master and say, hey, this guy knows a lot about this game. Maybe he can explain it to you. You know, so that's what we would do.
And what was your expertise area?
We were all experts with the more popular games, like Sonic the Hedgehog, Alex Kidd in Miracle World. But I also like my racing games. I love car racing games. I can't explain why. I also liked the long play platformers like Another World. Yeah, I was good with those ones. But I found that there'd be others that were better with their RPGs, for example, or platformers. I mean, look, basically anyone could play a platform. You know, anybody could be an expert with that because that was the thing back then.
Right.
You know, everybody plays first-person shooters these days. Everybody back then was playing platformers. So everybody knew the concept of that.
And you bring up Another World. Out here it was called Out of This World.
Yes.
By the Prince of Persia creator, who also made Flashback.
Yes, that's right. I did a walkthrough for that, and that was incredibly painful to do. I had to crack it overnight and then...
Overnight? Oh my god.
Yeah, because this is like one of the side jobs of being a SEGA master.
Those games are not easy.
Oh, God, no. God, no.
In fact, Flashback was one of those games that almost made me call a hotline.
It's not an easy game at all. You have to be incredibly patient. But that's one thing with me. Growing up in a country town, things didn't come to you very quickly, so you had to be patient. You had to sit and wait. I sat in the hospital wards for like weeks on end, just patiently waiting to get out. I think it's just burnt into me to just, wait for things, I guess.
Now let's talk about some of the hotline stuff, because I'm interested, all of our listeners are interested in some of the phone calls you would get and what were like some of the typical things and what were some of the atypical calls that you got? Okay, well,
first of all, let's deal with the demographic first. So we're talking about kids, but the next one in that line was lonely housewives. While the kids were out at school, and they should be at school, the mothers would ring up and play these games as well. And they will mainly play RPGs. Okay, so like your Ultimas or Immortal, games like that. So what were the sort of calls? Well, obviously you get calls about, Sonic, how do I get through this stage? I remember, I think it was Sonic 2, there was a red block. I think it was in the second level, but everybody had a hard time trying to get past. And it was all just a matter of timing and that. So you hear the kids. This was one of the things with the job. You had to listen as to the kids might be playing the games at the time, and you can hear them pushing the button, and you hear the whoop when the Sonic jumps. So you sort of like listen to them and say, no, you got the time wrong. Just wait, and you go now. And thanks, Senior Master Tim. So they They bring up about that. They bring up about cheats. How do I get to another level? How do I get free lives? Are there any cool things I can do? The irony is that even though I worked technically for a cheat line, I never cheated on any game. Never did. Because I just thought, look, back then it cost about $90 to buy a game. Why would you want to get a cheat straight away? Not get as much time and value out of that game, but you've just spent money on. So I never cheated, even though I knew all the cheats.
No, I agree. It was usually after I beat the game where I would use cheats.
Yeah, where you find out other little extra things.
Or if I rented, because we didn't own a whole lot of games. We didn't have the money.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so they call us about that. They ask us what games were coming out. We also used to have competitions as well from time to time where, somebody might want to call in and say, why would they want to get this game? Why is Sonic your favorite character? So there might be little campaigns like that might pop up every now and again. We also started doing a membership where you had to pay a membership to get cheats. But that's when I started not liking the job so much, when we're asking people money after they've already paid a lot of money for a game. But yeah, so walkthroughs, how to cheat, how to get through a stage. Yeah, that's what they would call up about and what was coming out for SEGA. Yeah.
Do you remember any strange phone calls or any good prank phone calls?
I know about a prank phone call that SinceSpacies used to do. He used to ring up Nintendo down in Melbourne and he'd ring up and say, hi, I'm just wondering when Sonic's coming out on the Nintendo, the NES. So that's what he used to do. But would we get prank calls? No, but I always recall one particular call where a bloke rings up and he goes, I need help. Oh, okay. What's wrong? Can't get it out of the box. What can't you get out of the box? I can't get me bloody Mega Drive out of the box. I've been trying for hours. I just want to get the bloody thing. Okay, well, so what is it? Well, just use the knife. No, I don't want to use a knife. I don't want to ruin the box. I want to keep it in mint condition. Okay. So, well, maybe if you slide a knife under... No, I'm just going to ruin it. Oh, this is beep, and hangs up. So his complaint was he couldn't get his Mega Drive out of the box. It was special. That was a special call. Yeah, I always remember that one. Yeah, I always recall that one. That was probably the weirdest call I ever had.
I like that.
The call went on for about 5 minutes. I tried to deal with this and just, cut open the box. I don't want to.
It makes me wonder, did he ever get it out of the box?
He probably never did, and it's now worth about $1,000 still mint in the box. Yeah.
What about frustrating calls?
I think
I know it's a long time ago.
It's a bit hard to remember. I think the frustrating calls always was Alex Kidd in Miracle World. And it's not because the attitude of the kids ringing up, it was because it was always the same reason, the same spot that they would always call up about. And the call would always start off with this, I'm in a room, okay, you got a pen ready? Do you even know what game? Yeah, you're in Alex Kidd in Miracle. Just get your pen ready. And the reason for this is because Alex Kidd in Miracle World got inbuilt into the SEGA Master 2. So everybody played it. So therefore, every call would be about Alex Kidd in Miracle World. And as a fact, we would get more calls about Alex Kidd in Miracle World than what we would do with Sonic.
Wow.
Because of that one bloody reason. Yeah. So, okay, all right. You got your pen ready? Oh, well, there's a room with symbols on a grid. Yeah, I know. Get your pen ready. All right, you got this? Sun, wave, moon, star, sun, moon, wave, fish, star, fish. Oh, okay. Yep, that's the order in which you go over them and you'll finish the game. See you later. Bye. Beep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Spacies was still able to recall that as well. That goes to show how often this was occurring.
Yeah, we have nightmares about that game and that room and those freaking symbols. That was the most frustrating call because most of the calls, that's what they were all about. Yeah, that's very, very bad. Very bad.
So you were working throughout the life or the time of you were still getting calls for Sega Master System games and Mega Drive?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Because when the Mega Drive came out, people were still buying the Master System because parents wanted to keep their kids happy, obviously.
Sure, and it probably was cheaper.
Well, yeah, that's it. It was cheaper, but it had the Sega brand on it. And all the kids would talk about, I want to get a Sega, I want to get a Sega. And so they get their kids the Master System if they couldn't get the Mega Drive. And sometimes, I remember I get a few calls where you hear mothers, especially mothers, saying, is the price of the Mega Drive coming down? Because they wanted to buy it for their kids. And did we sell any secondhand at the time or that? And I just feel so sorry for them because they're just trying to keep their kids happy, because the kids keep on saying, Michael's got Mega Drive and John's got a Mega Drive and I want a Mega Drive too. So, yeah, it sort of made me sad when I hear those calls.
I got another question for you.
Yeah.
In Spacies' interview, he mentioned that he also had an opportunity to do some writing at Sega.
Yes.
And you said you were cracking games for Sega to try to find, new cheats and ways you could get around.
Yes.
I was just wondering if you had any other responsibilities other than the phone line and cracking games while you were there.
Yeah, so the side jobs were doing reviews for video games. And for me, I wasn't ever given the really popular titles for probably two good reasons. The problem is because I didn't finish my high school, my word art was not that very good compared to the other staffers there. So that was one problem. The other problem is that they soon realized after I reviewed one game, I was a little bit too honest. Okay. Because Sega Aussie Soft owned the magazine that we were doing the reviews for. So there was an obvious bias to what we said about the games. There was Outrun 2019, and I hated the game, and it showed in my first draft. Okay, so the first review, I basically said this was a terrible game. After the third or fourth draft, it came down to, this game is not for everyone. Yeah, so I was a little bit too honest with what I was saying with my reviews. As I'm looking through here, Crash Test Dummies, Captain Planet, and Cyborg Justice. But the really difficult ones were doing walkthroughs. And the worst one that I had to do was the one for Flashback.
Mm-hmm.
I get handed the cartridge, said, Tim, can you do the walkthrough for Flashback? Can we have it ready tomorrow?
Oh.
This was like about home time, 5 o'clock. I'm ready to go home. And of course I said yes, didn't I?
Of course.
So I did it. What I had to do was play the game, crack the game, write down all the notes. I got about an hour or two sleep, and then I had to go, not into work, but I had to go to the publishers, and then I had to play the game again, and they had to do screenshots of the mapping of that game. It took on average about 2 minutes to do a screenshot for any game. So you think about how large Flashback was, and I was dead by the end of that. And for all that hard work, I got $50.
Oh, wow.
So, what other projects like that?
Sometimes we'll be asked to do PR things. We had a thing called a roadshow where we go around to shopping centres around Australia. There was one of the hotliners that used to do it on a regular basis. That was Nick. He would go out there and kids would come up and they'll play the games and all of that, and they'll ask us questions and that. And some of them might even ask, "Oh, are you SEGA Master Tim? Yeah. Oh, can you sign my cap for me?" So you do a little bit of autographing too. Yeah, so that was really cute. We'd also go to maybe game releases, or there was one instance, a magazine release that we went to, and we have celebrities show up there. They actually sort of celebrities would come into the office too, because we use them in our magazine. You know, we'll say, "Oh, celebrity X here loves playing SEGA. Tell us about what your favourite game is," and you know, we get all the shots and that for it, and give us our bit, increase the subscription, and sell more mags. Yeah.
And when you were at the hotline, were you working alongside Spacies? Is that where you met him?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, but that's where I met Spacies there. And there's one thing always, he's going to hate me when I say this. So one of the things that would happen when you worked at SEGA is that you would get games in ROM form before they were released. So uncompleted or almost finished titles. So I remember the one day I came in and lo and behold, they had the ROMs for Street Fighter 2 and were we excited? Everybody was excited. So here we are, we're playing this game that had not been released yet on the Mega Drive. We're playing Street Fighter 2, the first time you could play this game at home. And everyone's really excited. "Oh, give me a go. No work was done that day. I guarantee it. No work. The phones were busy. We didn't care. Me and the other workmates, there was another guy called Tim and his brother Nick, and Spacies are there, and we're walking back to the road to get onto the bus and that. Spacies was so excited. He just kept on going, "Hadouken!" And he's doing the action, you know, like the jump. He was so excited about his game, and we don't blame him, but he's in front of us, "Hadouken!" And we're all standing back there, just, yeah, it's a good game. Just maybe settle down, Brizza. We've been in touch ever since.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
SEGA Master Tim, for joining us. Put it out there one more time of where people can find you and
yes,
what material you're putting out.
Okay, so you'll just find me on Twitter mainly. Look for my name, SEGA Master Tim, or put in @Tim Gadler, Gadler. But be warned, I'm thinking of changing that soon in the next few months. Okay, so just keep an eye out on that. And yet, every day I'm on, put up a few posts about a few things. You know, please get in touch. I'm very happy to talk to you all. I'm very supportive of everyone out there trying to build their fan base and whatever endeavors that they have. That's always been in my nature. All right. So, that's where you can find me.
Yes. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to share these really, really interesting experiences with us about working at the hotline and everything else. Like, we really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate having me on your show. I really love doing these podcasts and sharing my experiences back in the day. Yeah, these sorts of things can't be kept to oneself. You have to share them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and good luck with your endeavors too. I hope things get even better from here, getting even bigger guests than myself.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure it's going to go well for you.
I hope so. What an amazing set of interviews that was. But since we're already running down the clock, we're going to quickly burn through your responses to our questions about cheat codes and hotlines.
For our Tells the Tale section of the show, I asked, were you ever stuck in a video game and called a tip or cheat hotline for help? What was it for? And did they actually help you? And what were your favorite or most memorable cheat codes that you've used in video games?
First on the block is Winstolf, the Bizarro Mage of the wellreadmages.com. He puts out Twisted Metal World Tour on PS1. not a line as such, but my favorite magazine, Power Station, used to list all the cheats, unlocks, and special moves in the back, and that made me unbeatable. Plus, I could play Sweet Tooth.
Yeah, remember when gaming magazines would print codes?
Remember gaming magazines?
Oh. Next, we have Lucas, Aussie Gamer 12. He said he called the SEGA Hotline when he was a kid. It was for Lion King on the Mega Drive. He didn't understand a word of the explanation because it was so confusing, but he was happy to go back to the game and absolutely fluke the level he was stuck on and made it through. $15 well spent. That was one expensive phone call.
Or it was for the membership, and you probably had such a poor explanation because Tim and Spacies had already moved on. The Ghetto Gamer at Longy Long, formerly interviewed on one of our previous episodes. I remember asking my parents if I could pretty please call about Shadowrun for SNES. So many cryptic clues. I had been sucking at games for years, but it never occurred to me that I could get help. Anyway, they said, sure, go ahead. And after that, I called them all the time.
And then I replied, I bet your parents love the phone bill.
To which he said, that was nothing compared to the America Online bill. 500 free minutes goes pretty fast.
Next, we have a tweet by Gemma Corker at Gem Ibisu. I hope I said that right. Alien Trilogy on PS1.
I got pink acid boots on. The invincibility code. However, numbers are mixed in with the letters.
Except we got the code from a kid down the street with a book of cheats, and me and my bro were mostly too dumb to read it as actual words. So we just recited 1 GOTP, 1 NK4, SI, etc., etc.
That's pretty funny because I had completely forgotten about that till I read that tweet, and then it all came back to me like a flash.
You use that cheat code too?
I certainly did. I don't remember where I got it from, probably a magazine, but I loved Alien Trilogy. Fantastic game. A must-own for PS1 owners.
Next, we have a tweet by Norinrad2 Turbo at Norinrad3rd. The only time I used it was for Wild Arms, when I was stuck inside of a book later in the game. I had to open up a certain sequence of cheats, and the riddles were vague. But I'll never forget the options they gave. Press 5 for De La Metallica. It walked me through the part in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I kind of remember that part. It was a long time ago, though, but it's a very good game. Helped establish the RPGs on PlayStation 1. At Bulwark 2 says, we didn't have hotlines, but we did have an HTML-based cheat database that was distributed on game magazines. Most memorable, IDDQD. Favorite, the one that unlocked a Spyro demo in one of the Crash games.
And IDDQD was a code in Doom on the PC that gave you God Mode.
The God Mode code.
Next, we have a tweet by Soundtest at SNDTST. I once called the SEGA Hotline to talk about my ideas for a Sonic 2 game. Looking back, it was super embarrassing. And I asked, well, did any of your ideas show up in the game? And Soundtest said, well, none that I could remember. Back then, the SEGA Hotline was just a regular phone number, but it was based on San Francisco, which was the same area code as Oakland back then. I think my mom just enjoyed the break in my endless desire to talk about video games with her.
He created Tails, and they stole the idea from him. Mark Brown at Moogle Panda says, we had cheat books we got with monthly gaming mags. Hated the ones that weren't really cheats, but were like, complete the game to unlock blah blah blah. Most used cheats over the years are definitely the PS2 Grand Theft Auto cheats for unlocked guns and health and stuff. Yeah, I mean, really, I'm one of those who never really bothered playing the storyline in Grand Theft Auto and always just goofed off, and I loved having the cheats where you can, call down tanks.
Oh, my favorite was turning on like the low gravity mode for cars, and then getting the tank spawned, and then you could like turn the gun or the barrel of the tank backwards and fire, and then you start flying. It's so fun.
Good stuff.
We have another tweet by One Angry Jiro at Games Aren't Art. Using the Tuk 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 code in Age of Empires 3 to get an invincible monster truck to help me get past some of the harder levels.
I don't think I played Age of Empires enough to know that one. At Benzuko Lives Yep, Body Harvest on the N64. I phoned a cheat number in a magazine. I was very drunk and had a long chat with the person on the other end about dogs.
I replied, I keep thinking about your phone bill afterwards.
And he says, I was 15. My dad paid it. How drunk were you at 15? And how much did it take to get you drunk?
Was this a regular occurrence?
Oh, that wild Benzuko.
Next, we have a tweet by Nick at JapanGamer29. In the original Sim City,
there is that weird process you go through when you first start a city where you can get the unlimited, not unlimited, but so much money that you can never really spend it all.
Oh, you could spend it all.
I mean, if your map's big enough, I guess.
So you hold shift and you type fund. You could only use it 8 times in a row or else they'll punish you with an earthquake. But you could kind of cheese the save, so you could just type it in 7 times, save your game, quit, turn your game back on, and type it in 7 more times.
Oh, wow. I was talking about the SNES one.
Oh, no, this is the one on PC.
Mm-hmm. Mosky Bear at Ursus Mosky Bear says, Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest. The tip guy gave us 2 tips. One was to kneel with one of the crystals in front of a lake. The other tip was to kneel in front of a wall with something. Forgot what it was. Also, the Konami code in the Ninja Turtles arcade game for NES. Yeah, how could anyone figure out that whole sequence you're supposed to do in Simon's Quest?
Yeah, that's really bizarre. It was like kneel in front of a wall and wait for a tornado to come and get you after like 10 seconds. Like, who's really gonna actually do that?
And you have to get an item. I don't remember what it was, but thanks to the Angry Video Game Nerd, it has been immortalized.
And of course, the Konami code.
Of course!
That is like, when people say cheat codes in games, people just say, oh yeah, the Konami code, you know. Then we have a tweet from Ultra Healthy Video Game Nerd at Ultra Healthy VI1. I called about Shadowgate way back in 1990 or 1991. They told me the spell I needed to pass some section, and it made me realize that the spell names are also hints.
That's a game I feel like I know the box, but don't know the game.
Did you ever play it?
I couldn't tell you, but I know I saw the box many times at the rental store.
Well, it must have been a really tough game because our last tweet is from Rob at Irreverent Gamer. And he said he called in about Shadowgate on the NES. They got him past the part he was stuck on.
Well, that's it for all of our tweet cheats. Also, Sega Master Tim replied, but he said things that he said in his interview, and I think he replied before he found out he was going to be on the show.
But that's okay, Tim.
Otherwise, real-time strategy games are definitely one set of games where I use cheats a lot.
Oh.
So I'm not super good at them.
You're not very strategic, are you?
And I love having the fog of war lifted so you can just see the whole map.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever call in a cheat or a tip hotline?
Heck no. My parents... See, that's why I was kind of shocked in her interview to find out their system for the SEGA hotline in Australia, because over here, I mean, they straight up told you they were charging per minute.
What if they charge per cheat code?
Oh, that'd be terrible. Per word, per letter.
Oh, gosh. I called them once to prank call them. It was Nintendo, and I just remember talking about my Nintendo 64 was, gonna blow up or something, and they were just so professional about it. It sucked the fun out of the phone call. And they just stayed on the line with me as I kept going on, clearly being a prank phone call at this point. And they were too nice and too professional about it. Maybe if I called Sega, they would have been more funny with the with the prank phone call.
They might have had more fun with you.
Yeah. Nintendo's so stuffy.
Any memorable video game cheats?
One of my most memorable cheats, and I talked about it on the SinceSpacies show on his YouTube channel, was the Shadow of the Empires for a Nintendo 64 debug menu cheat, where you have to hold down a bunch of buttons on the N64 controller, and it takes 2 hands, and then you have to tilt the joystick ever so slightly to the left and right, back and forth. You can't do it all the way, or it doesn't count. So I would, use my chin while I'm holding the controllers in both hands to unlock this debug mode. And from that, it was really cool because in certain levels you could play as the enemies, and you could also, change around the amount of fog in the game. I remember you could get a top-down camera view or see through the walls, and Oh, it was really fun. I think that and probably Grand Theft Auto cheats were probably my most favorite and memorable.
One setup I always thought was neat was Mortal Kombat 3 had that hidden system where during you were waiting for the match to load, there was like the little symbols that you could change under your character. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah.
And if you arrange them in the right sequences, you would unlock you would enable certain things like one button fatalities, health recovery. You could disable blocking, just a whole bunch of things. Just a bunch of stuff that I don't even remember. So that was always fun, too, just the quest of people trying to figure those out.
Well, it's really sad to see that cheat codes aren't really a big thing in video games anymore, and there's no secrets behind them, because as soon as something is found, the internet knows about it, and it's just one click away. I kind of miss the mystery of cheat codes.
But we have new mysteries, like glitches and hacks and digging through source code to find unused assets. There's a wonderful YouTube channel out there called Boundary Break, where they use cameras to go outside of the limits of the game environments to find weird things or to see how developers load assets into their games. I always find that very interesting.
So although those aren't cheats, that's something that you couldn't do back then that you can do now, and it's very, very interesting.
But that's about all the time we have for today in our jam-packed double interview, double stuffed Oreo special episode. We hope you all had a great time and continue to listen to us and also check out SinceSpacies and Sega Master Tim.
And if you'd like to keep up with the Bit War veterans, you could follow us on Twitter at BitWarVets. You could also follow my personal Twitter account at MeowTeiChing. Don't forget we got a YouTube channel. We're recently been doing some riffs on the E3 presentations, and we always have more things in store for you. So check us out on YouTube at Bit War Veterans.
And if you've made it this far, that means you
and we
are Bit War Veterans!